Recording. Very good. Okay, welcome everyone. This is Brigid's Well, Healing with the Elements of Life on Revolution Radio. And Mitzie and I invited Galilee Carlisle, farmer, health advocate, educator, and stellar individual to speak to the topic, how are you going to feed yourself? Homestead farming is not a norm. And we're inviting Galilee to speak to her experience specific to land management, efficiency with animals and vegetable production, and also speaking to the concentrated fertility of dietary needs, just to share some insights because it's easier said than done. So welcome, Galilee. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And I'm glad you're here too, Mitzie.
Hi, nice to be here. Thanks so much, Galilee. I always enjoy talking with you, and we always get some good material out of our shows when we interview you. So thanks again for coming on today.
Yeah, well, thanks for the opportunity to do pre-recording, so that works good.
Good. You know, like no matter what we know of you, Galilee, you are always encouraging us away from digital technology. You know, we just say your name and it invokes do something productive.
Yeah,
So,
well, I was actually thinking of maybe starting on that overlap, since some of your listeners may have heard me talk before and they think that, or they are connect my name with internet addiction and technology issues, and so I actually want to make kind of an overlap with farming and that to begin with, if that's a good starting place.
yes.
So I know that the tendency nowadays for people to want to Google something or look something up on YouTube is really big, and I want to steer people away from that. Don't look it up on YouTube. Don't Google it, because that actually erodes our innate abilities and our connections with people who know things who are near us, and the people who know things who are near us are the most valuable resources, and our own innate intuitive capacity for witnessing and observing that comes from staying away from technology is really what is necessary to be a successful homestead farmer. And I, like I've mentioned before, I really feel like an approach to technology, to Google in particular, is don't Google anything that existed before the internet. So, and I know you've heard me say this before, but there will be listeners who haven't heard it. So don't Google how to change a tire or how to fry an egg or how to grow beans, because those things all existed before the internet. Now, you might want to Google what does HTTP mean, you know, or something like that that's internet-based, or something that's current and it did not exist before the internet. So that's sort of a litmus test to, should I look this up on the internet or not? Did it exist before the internet? Don't look it up. If it didn't exist before the internet, then you could look it up. That's just a way to sort of navigate that we utilize. And I am a successful farmer here in Western Washington. I farm on 30 acres, which abuts private forest land, but really we grow a lot of food on just 2 acres of the 30 acres. The rest is hay and orchards and woodlot and just wild spaces and buildings and that kind of stuff. So you can grow a lot of food in a small space. And I did not learn everything I know about farming. I learned from doing and from other people. I never looked up anything on the internet about anything related to farming, and I've been farming for 30 years. So I just don't use the internet that way. And I encourage other people not to, even though people will say, oh, look it up on YouTube. I just want to be a voice against that, just as a starting place.
I really like that. And even today, I was looking up how many local farmers there are in this region, and it brought me to a website that I learned is Local Harvest, and it's owned by a Chinese company. So an offshore company is managing how people are sourcing local
Yeah.
producers instead of just
What people
finding
are
them.
looking up too, and what people are looking up, and all that data mining is really what it's a lot about, mining our interests and so that they can navigate controlling our attention and intention. So it's a good thing to stay away from, and to learn from books, neighbors, field trips are really great. A lot of what I learned like early on in my first like 10 or 15 years of farming, a lot of that was from visiting other farms and going and spending a couple hours or spending a night. Or I learned so much that way that I still utilize and have learned to incorporate into my own systems. And the other big place of learning is experimenting on your own land and observing. Don't experiment. If you're going to be a good experimenter, you have to take notes and keep track of what you've done. And I put this here and I did that, and then the next year I tried it here at this date, and that's really important.
So yeah, and over the years you've managed different types of animals and crops, and you probably have come up with your own methods of what's working for you now.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
do you, specifically, like with where you put animals, do you integrate that with any sort of crop rotation, or is it mostly for compost collection and then it's shared where you're growing your crops?
Well, I will address that, but I want to back up a little bit to the big question of how will you feed yourself, because is that okay if I back up just a little bit, big picture?
Yes, please.
Yeah. So a lot of people think, oh, when things get bad, we'll just grow our own food. I hear that a lot, like, oh, we'll just move to the country and grow our own food. And I just want to tell, or when 2020 came, people thought, oh, we'll have a big garden and grow our own food and think it's going to be so easy. And I want to just say that as far as feeding ourselves in uncertain times, it's both harder and easier than people think. And I want to say that I want to explain that a little bit. It's harder than people think because it takes years of experimenting and learning and soil building and building up your fencing systems and dealing with predators and learning your own land. It takes years of all that kind of stuff to get really good at it. So that's why it's harder. It's because you can't just do it all of a sudden. But it's easier than people think, because people think there's this idea of, oh, farming is so hard. It must be so much work and so exhausting. But actually, once you get good at it, and you've learned your soil, and you've learned your land, and you've learned your predators, and you've learned your systems, it's actually not that hard. So the myths that, oh, you could just do it any time and it's so easy, and the fact that it's so hard, neither of those are true. It's actually the opposite. Does that make some sense? I think 3 of you are listening, so at least right now and during this recording. So did I make sense there?
Absolutely. Yeah, and I would apply that to the schedule that I would create around when I am propagating, because I have moved around quite a bit, so adjusting to new systems, I've learned to adapt often. But that makes a lot of sense, because you don't just suddenly change your livelihood and schedule,
yeah,
and expect that it won't be bumpy.
Yeah.
So that makes a lot of sense.
It also requires a lot of attention, which a lot of people don't want to pay that much attention to things that are slow and not exciting. It's not like a movie. Growing food is not a movie. It's slow.
No.
It's slow, and you gotta pay attention And you got to observe and witness all the time, all the teeny little changes. So you got to kind of change your way of focusing and thinking to get good at it. But it's not actually. But it's actually fairly surprisingly easy once you're good at it. And the time to start farming or homesteading was actually years ago. But don't lose heart, because here we are, and you could start today. And now is a good time to start. And you can actually grow a lot on half an acre if you plan and prioritize. As I think about our farm and the 2 acres that we have in row crops, 3/4 of that is for sale anyways, and we grow a huge amount of our own food on a half an acre, and way more than most people in this part of the world grow for themselves anyways. But it doesn't take that much space. That's another myth, like, oh, you got to have 10 acres, or you don't have to have 10 acres.
Right.
I mean, adding animals in definitely increases the space you need, and that helps link to the question that Jenna had about overlapping animal and plant spaces. I mostly don't at this point in my farming expedition, but I have at different times had grow a cover crop, have a couple pigs in that cover crop to eat it up and fertilize, and then plan on planting in there. You can't plant where pigs have been right away because of the cross-contamination of feces. That humans and pigs share some illnesses, or can share some, so you have to be a little more careful with that. So you have to wait 6 months to plant there where pigs have been. Chickens, not so long. You can do 6 weeks where chickens have been. So I have done some of that, but right now we just keep our animals in certain areas and we bring stuff from the garden to them rather than bringing the animals to the garden. But I've seen all kinds of creative, and that's where going to visit other farms, you can see all kinds of creative things that people do where they have rotating garden pens that have chickens in them at certain times and then not. And we've just found it easier to keep the plants and animals sort of separate at this point.
And I've seen that as more of a investment in the electric grid setups, because those are easy to maneuver.
The electrical fences, yeah.
Sure.
Mm-hmm. And most animals really respect them. The ducks don't, because ducks, they don't feel the electricity at all. So it does not work with ducks, but it works with pigs and goats and cows, and they really respect the fence. Even when you turn it off, they know that they still respect it if they're trained with it.
Sure. You've experimented with creating a movable pig tractor in the past. I remember seeing that. Do you think that was efficient?
All kinds of movable fences are great. Any kind of like a movable pig, like chicken tractors we have rabbit tractors where we move them. We have chicken tractor that we move. And for listeners who don't know what you mean by a tractor, it's like a pen that you can lift up and push or pull to put the animal on fresh grass or fresh ground. And with like the pig tractor, Brian would be the one to speak to that most, because he mostly did the building on that. So, but that is a heavy thing, so you're not going to do that by hand. You actually need a tractor or a truck to move or pull that, because pigs are so, they're rambunctious. You have to build something heavier. But the rabbit tractors that we have, I can lift them with 2 fingers and move them, and the chicken tractor is more of it takes all my muscles or 2 people to move it, but it's not that hard, and that gets moved depending on what age the chickens are. They might get moved every day or every month, depending on how many chickens are in it and how old the chickens are and how much they're shitting.
Right.
Yeah, but I love movable fencing. We use it for For pigs, we use movable electric fencing, so you might move it every week into a different square, and it makes a nice just square, and you can keep your pen in the middle and just kind of rotate or your little house, your pig house. You can keep it in the middle and then rotate your fence around in sort of a cloverleaf pattern. It's really great, and you can have solar energizers on the fence system if you don't want it. And then a lot of if pigs are trained to it when they're little, often they won't push out of it unless they get to being really playful or fighting with each other, and they just blow through because they're being goofy, not because they actually want to get out.
Sure.
Yeah.
In terms of how much you spend on feeding pigs, what is the do you market some of your pigs?
We are currently not. We don't have any pigs for sale at this point. We have in the past, and we've done a whole variety of things. We've done regular pigs that you feed grain to, and then you gotta, make back the money on the grain. And we've done pasture pigs that eat grass and garden things, and that's not very much money on that. But right now we don't have any baby pigs. We just have our boar, so we're not really in that right now. But there are a lot of things. I wouldn't recommend starting with pigs for anybody who is just getting started with farming. I would recommend growing plants for food to begin with, and then maybe in your third year or start adding in animals. But I would focus on plants for a few years. I know a lot of people get really excited about growing animals because they're cute and they're like movies, right? I mean, people are very into things that are more exciting, and I think plants are exciting personally, but I'm a little wacko. But if you're going to start with animals, the best animal to grow for meat is rabbits, because you can grow all their food. You need to buy very little food. If you start cutting grass and underbrush from the forest and all the tops from your green things and all the leaves from your cabbages and all the ugly weird looking carrots and all the beets that crack and you can grow clovers and cover crops and everything. It's easy to grow food for rabbits. They're easy to kill. They're easy to cook. They don't taste as good as chicken. But if you put a little bacon with them, they taste delicious. And then chickens are the next best thing to raise for starting out animals. The meat birds, they can grow them in 10 weeks. And like you mentioned earlier on in the show, you don't even have to have a lot of land for it. You could use some neighbor's land. The thing about raising animals, well, plants too, but animals, especially when they're really young, they need 2, 3, or 4 times a day of observation and changing waters or feeders or temperature or lights or fencing or whatever. There's always something you're tweaking. So if you're growing it at a neighbor's house, they either need to be on board with you about it, or you need to be over there 2 or 3 times a day, which is a lot of coordinating. And the reason that worked with the person that you mentioned, Mary, I actually lived on the property where she made an arrangement to raise meat birds on the property, and I also was raising meat birds, so it was easy for me. I was already in that mindset at the same time of day, so I would check on mine and I would check on hers. Now, she did the majority of it. She came once a day and did all the hard stuff, but I was also looking at them just to make sure everything was okay and taking care of little tidbits as they came along. So you got to have somebody else on board. But, people like to collaborate most of the time, and if you find your sort of people that you like to collaborate with, and then you do stuff together, and just be responsible. Don't be irresponsible, and people won't want to work with you. That's public service announcement right there.
Right. You both want the same thing, and the best way
Right.
to go about it is cooperating.
And
Yes.
being responsible, follow through, do what you say you're going to do, and don't expect a big gold star for just doing what you're going to do. People want, part of the problem nowadays is people want instant feedback. They want, lots and lots of pats on the back and praise for just doing normal stuff like being a good person. Like you don't need a lot of praise for that, but it does make it harder. I mean, I'm digressing a little bit, but if we're talking about working with others and collaborating with others on stuff, like you have to be good and not expect to be praised for being good, you know.
Yeah, I
I
agree.
don't know why I get off on that tangent, except for part of what worked about working with Mary. I mean, part of why that worked is I was already farming on the property. She didn't have land. She wanted to graze and meat birds. And I liked her, and she was easy to work with, and she did her part, and she followed through, and she didn't need a lot of pampering and babying, and neither did I, and that's why that worked out, you know.
Sure.
And the birds did great. And she raised a lot of birds that year. I was just raising the normal whatever I raised, and she was raising like 4 or 5 times what I did.
Wow. Was that the first time that she had done that, or she had more experience in the
I
past?
think she had some experience somewhere else. Yeah, I don't think
Sure.
it was a first for her. But she didn't have she just lived in a little rental at that time and didn't have room for such things. And she sold, yeah, anyways, it worked out good.
Well, I definitely learned by experience by participating with one of your endeavors in the processing. And
Yeah.
then I went, I was invited to help process an in a facility, which was really nice, about 75 birds for a day. And I was able to go home with a couple birds, which
Yeah.
was great to reinforce, to remember the processing. And it was a really nice situation. Someone was looking over my shoulder, and there were, warm water wands hanging above our heads. It was really nice.
Wow.
And
That's really
this,
great.
yeah, but this brings it back to once before you had recommended, if you want to really learn how to farm, the best way to do that is to apprentice with someone for 2 seasons.
Yep. I stand by that. You will learn so much, and then you get to help them, and then it's in your body, not just in your head. You know?
And how about with learning how to market a product or a niche, or like
I wanted to ask something first about the apprenticeship. Galilee, do you take apprentices sometimes? Do you have students that come and work with you on the farm?
Right now, I have a couple neighbor kids that are working with me one morning a week. So let's see, years ago, we had a young couple living here, and they had a little section that they were responsible for of their own, and they helped out. So nothing official. I don't have any official things, although Brett and I have talked about having a farm school here at some point, but the time is not now. We have talked about that.
I think that's a great idea. These young people these
people
days
are together and they're learning together.
Yeah.
We had talked about having like 4 or 5 or 6 students, and they would just live here on the farm for the summer, and not and we would increase our market capacity so that we could keep them all busy. But the time is not now to do that, although it is a good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah. But a lot of farms do. I mean, most farms need people. Our farm is pretty. I have pretty much kept it to what we can do ourselves right now, because I haven't wanted to have the extra work of having employees at this point.
Yeah. There's some people, I'm noticing that some people are actually charging money to come on, and then I guess it's more of a school where you would actually be having classes and stuff too.
Yeah, right. Where they'd be teaching, where, like Jenna said, learning how to market and all that kind of stuff too, so that when they were done here, that they could start their own thing.
Right. So, like Jenna was asking, do you when you have had people on there, do you kind of train them in marketing too, or?
I haven't really done that. No, I mean one person I did years ago, yes, but mostly I haven't been doing that. but it would be a part of any serious situation that I set up with anybody. And if you're a listener and you're thinking about setting up an apprenticeship with a farm, you should make sure that you're clear about what you want to learn. And if you're not, if you're just open to learning anything, that's great too. But you can tell the farmer that you're going to work with, like, these are the 3 things I really, really, really want to learn. So let's make sure and incorporate those in, and that way the farmer knows. Because a lot of times things do go sour with farm apprentices sometimes, and farm apprentice situations sometimes, because people aren't clear at the outset of. Farmers aren't necessarily clear at the outset of what their expectations are, and apprentices aren't clear enough about what they are wanting to get out of it. And so then expectations fall short on both ends, and people get frustrated with each other. So the clearer you can be at the outset of what you want, the better things will turn out. And keep in mind, too, that a lot of people who are drawn to farming are people who are a little bit maybe, I'm going to say, who like to be alone a lot of the time, and who are a little bit alternative, So you're going to find that if you're working on a farm, you're going to be working with, maybe an oddball sort of a person who likes to be alone a lot, because a lot of the people who are drawn to farming are that way. So keep that in mind.
Yeah. What do you think of the woofing program that was up for a long time? It seemed like it was pretty popular, but it seems like it's kind of waning in popularity. I'm not sure, but
well, it's just because there's so many other ways to find things. That was like the only way at the time. At the time it started woofing. I think it's still very popular in other countries. We have some friends down the road who are hosts of woofers, and they have had extremely mixed experiences, like some really, really amazing woofers, and then some really slacker woofers. But that gets to people not being clear. Most of the problems that have arisen with woofing, as far as I have heard in my stories, is that people are unclear about expectations on one end or the other. Either the landowner is unclear about what they're expecting, or it just comes down to being better with communication, I think, of what you're expecting and stating that. And I think that's important. So we were talking about animals. I want to go back more and talk about vegetables, and because I think that's, unless you don't want me to, but I think.
No, please do. Yes.
So if you're really trying to feed yourself, there are a dozen crops that you should be growing that are pretty easy, and you can get a lot of nutrition out of them, and they're easy to store and pretty easy to grow. So, and then there are other things that you should actually just purchase and put in your pantry and put in your freezer or whatever. So I really do advocate, if you're talking about feeding yourself, I do advocate for doing some back stock of purchasing. I'm not somebody who is like, oh my God, you need to have 50 years worth of food and sealed buckets and all this stuff, but I could go through a list of things I think you should purchase and put in your back stock if you want to.
Yes.
Do you want me to talk about that?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah. I think powdered milk, grains, cornmeal, nuts, raisins, butter for the freezer, oil. Those are things that I really recommend that you buy, because if you're hungry, those are going to be easy to cook. They store super well. I know I'm a farmer, so you think, oh, they just grow all their own food. Well, no, but it's also important to have some back stock if you're thinking about being safe and having something. So those are things that I recommend. And I always tell my neighbors, I've told all the neighbors up and down the road know that about me, because I give them a list every year just reminding them, make sure you have these things on stock, because even though I'm your neighbor and I farm, you're not going to be able to come to me if you're hungry. because we only got enough for ourselves, basically. So would you please take care of yourself?
Good for
And
you.
not to be rude, but it's like, oh, and I also tell them to keep on hand some sweetener of their favorite sort, like a year's worth. I always tell people, like, try to have a year's worth of these things. And also any, like, a favorite thing. If some people just, like, really love dried apricots or whatever, like, have yourself a huge bucket of dried apricots. Darn it. Just, like, or, you know, whatever it is, whatever your thing is, coffee, whiskey, whatever, you know, make sure you got a bunch of that, because I'm not going to be able to take care of you. I mean, I can help yourself. That I can do. But I can't help you in an emergency. You know, I mean, I got lots of Band-Aids and stuff like that, but, you know, I don't have enough food for all my neighbors in an emergency.
Right. So that's what you're doing now. You're helping us to sort out, visualize how we can help ourselves in the garden with plants and what would be the easiest things to grow.
Yeah. So
do you have,
what?
I was wondering if you have a root cellar.
A root cellar in Western Washington is a terrible idea.
Oh, okay.
It would be full of water.
Yeah. Right.
However,
Okay.
where I grew up in New Mexico, we had a root cellar, and a lot of people still do, and we definitely used it. I remember the cabbages hanging from the ceiling, and boxes of apples on one side, and boxes of potatoes on the other side, and buckets. We had bins with carrots in sand. We would store the carrots in sand in bins on the floor. I remember one time there was a big rattlesnake in there. But around here, a root cellar is not necessary in Western Washington, because you can grow a lot of crops year round, and then you just use freezer and dehydrator and canning for all the rest. And we have an old freezer that is not plugged in, that it does not work anymore. An old freezer that we use to keep some things down in the barn, and you leave it cracked open when the weather is normal, and then on super, super, super cold times, you close it up, and it keeps things from freezing. So we have, like, potatoes in there and onions. Garlic, it's too moist outside. The garlic needs to be in a drier place. But, does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So, but there are great books out there about old books. You know, a lot of the old books are really great on that stuff, root cellaring and storage crops. There's so many. If you go to any used bookstore, there's going to be a section on that kind of stuff, and you can pick up a book where all the information there is still applicable. Nothing has changed much in that regard. And experimentation is important. And, you know, learning how to store stuff properly is really important. Like, I had somebody I did a table at a preparedness fair last month, and somebody came up, and I had a garden table for garden questions, and somebody said, you know, all my squashes I brought inside last year, and I thought I was going to have a whole winter's worth of squash, and they all rotted within a month. What happened? And I was like, well, did you cure them? And she said, what's that? And so luckily I had a little write-up on how to cure squash that I handed to her, because squash need their stems to dry down and their skins to harden, and they need 2 weeks of warm temperatures after harvesting to do that. So I told her how to do that. You can bring it in by your wood stove. You can put it in a heated bathroom with a fan going, because if you want your squash to last all winter, I'm looking at a bunch of ours right now, actually, it's a real shame to grow something and harvest it and bring it in the house and all that, and then not have that food. So winter squash is really important. And if you have like 10 plants of winter squash, that's going to be plenty for food for a pretty big family. I would do at least 2 different types. And potatoes are a great thing to grow. Is it okay if I launch right into that? Or?
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So potatoes are great. Make sure you don't grow just one kind. I grow 12 kinds of potatoes every year, and I recommend that people grow at least 4 types, because any one year you might have a disease or an insect or just a very, variation that wipes one out or makes one not produce well. So, and also different potatoes are good for cooking different ways, so that's nice. And there's hundreds of types of potatoes in the world. So,
do they need to be
potatoes
separated?
is something you can save your own seed. No, they do not need to be separated.
Okay.
Potatoes, you can save your own seed, which is great. I haven't bought new potato seed except for when I want to try a new variety. I haven't had to buy any new potato seed for 20 years or something. So that's a great thing.
When do you put your potatoes in?
Anywhere between May 1st and June 1st.
Okay.
And the potatoes don't need a whole lot of water. Some people tend to overwater potatoes, and then you get weird denting and cracking and more disease. Peas are something that are good to grow because you can freeze or dry them and can them too. I don't like canned peas, but you could. Leeks and onions, especially leeks, are really great to grow. I could have a little chart of how much and dates and types that I could email to both of you, and you could share somehow with your listeners. I don't know how you would do that, but I could send it to you. And leeks are great because they provide all the immune stimulation of the whole onion family with a lot of vitamins and minerals because they're green. So it's just a really nice combination. And they're also a lot easier to grow than onions, like 5 times easier to grow than onions. And in our climate in Western Washington, you can overwinter them, and we're still harvesting leeks from last fall. So those are seeded on May 1st and transplanted on July 1st. And then you harvest them all fall and winter. Of course, cucumbers and tomatoes and zucchinis are great to grow because people know how to cook them and eat them and store them. They're not huge nutrition, but they're a lot of joy and fairly easy to share if you grow too much. Carrots, you should do at least 2 plantings of carrots, like an early one on June 1st, and then a later one on maybe anywhere between July 15th and August 1st for overwintering in our climate. And if you don't know in your climate, wherever you're listening from, like talk to some old timers. They know what to do, or some people who've been farming at least a few years in your area and see what they do. I'm sure they figured it out. Kale, it's like the underdog of gardening, but it's also like so high in nutrition that it's like something you should definitely plant, and you can overwinter it. So you could cover it if it's getting really snowy or whatever, and then uncover it after the snow is done. And it can handle freezing and bouncing back too, so that's great. Cabbages. Yeah.
Go ahead. Oh, I was just going to say kale chips can be a fun experiment to make them more tasty, and my mom loves them. So I ship her kale chips.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah, so kale can be dehydrated, it can be frozen, it can be pickled or not fermented. And it's a great solution. And of course, you want to grow beets too, because they're really high in nutrition, both the greens and the bottoms, and high in all kinds of minerals and vitamins. I also recommend doing at least 2 plantings. We do 4 plantings of a lot of things to keep throughout the year, but for a new gardener, maybe 2 plantings would be good enough. One maybe May 15th and one July 15th to August 1st for overwintering. And you want to look at the varieties that you're growing. It's kind of late to get seed if you haven't already gotten seed. Really, seed companies are stretched pretty thin these days, so I order my seeds really early. But if you even just go to a hardware store, often they have seed racks still full now. They're not going to be the highest quality seed, but at least you'll have something. Green beans you should grow because you can freeze, dry, or can them and eat them fresh. Even just as much as 20 feet of green beans could definitely feed a family of 4, and there's lots of ways to put them up, and pretty much all varieties are good. I grow pole beans, but you can grow bush beans if you don't want to deal with building the trellis. And then dry beans, I'm a huge advocate of growing dry beans. Even in Western Washington, people would think, oh, it's too moist, but I've been growing dry beans to feed myself and my family and my friends for long time, 30 years probably, and saving seed all along. And 200 feet of dry beans is easy to grow. Plant on June 1st. There's lots and lots of old cool varieties still out there that are available, and you can save your seed, and it's just a great thing to do. And on the note of seed saving, I do want to say a lot of people have their eyes or have their heads in the sand or something, or have their eyes in the stars or something about seed saving. They think, oh, I saved seed from that. Isn't that great? Most things, it's not going to work. It's not going to work unless you know what you're doing, and you should get there's a book called Seed to Seed by Suzanne Ashworth, I think. I could.
Yeah,
I have the book is in the other room, but you can't just save seed from anything and have it come true. When you save seed from most things, I'm gonna just put a little note out there to all listeners. A lot of people don't know this because they get really excited about just saving seed because it seems like the right thing to do. But from a lot of things, if you haven't isolated them from similar plants of the same family, they will cross, and the seeds you will get will be like grandparents, I like to say, because things revert to their grandparents. They will be bitter and hard. Not that all grandparents are bitter and hard. This is just kind of in a joking vein. But most ancestors of most yummy things we love in the garden are bitter, tiny, hard, flat, because that's what wild plants are. And we have selected out. So, and all the plants that we eat and love have wild ancestors, and plants revert very quickly. So you have to know what you're doing when it comes to saving seed, is what I'm saying. But one of the nice things about dry beans is you don't really have to know what you're doing. You can just save the seed, and they almost always come true. And even when they don't, they're not bad. So maybe too.
So maybe I've been just very lucky with some winter squash, like the blue Hubbard. But it has changed, but they're still large. And
yeah.
I'm just
if you're
lucky.
only growing one of the family, so squashes have 3 different families, well, I shouldn't say family, it's more like species, with 3 different species within the whole winter squash group. And if you're only growing one from each species, then they won't cross. And if you start with an heirloom seed and you only grow one Hubbard type, because Hubbards don't cross with pumpkins, for example. So you could, because there are different species. So you could have a Hubbard. The guy have the corky stems, and the pumpkins have the more pokey stems. So they don't cross. So that's nice. So you might not have just gotten lucky. You might be doing the right thing.
Okay, great. Recommendations for a canning book. I have a Blue Ball magazine type canning book.
Yeah. Those are great. You can get those at the hardware store. Yep. Still, and they have the new updated edition for the less acidic tomatoes and all that. That is a real great basic. And again, if you go to any used bookstore, they're going to have a pile of canning and preserving books, I assure you.
Right.
Or go to the library book sale, annual book sale. Because those are the kinds of things that get donated all the time.
Sure. Brian has a question for you. He would like you to name 15 different fruits.
Is this a test? Or fruits to grow?
Yeah.
Fruits to grow?
Easy to grow. 15 different fruits, easy to grow.
15 fruits, easy to grow. Strawberries, grapes, crab apples, raspberries, cantaloupe, Well, most people have apples. I don't know if you count that as easy to grow because it takes time for them to start. Once they're easy to grow, but the great thing is you can graft onto funky old apple trees. You can graft new, and we've been doing a lot of that on our farm, and it's the most exciting thing going on here right now. We've been grafting known varieties onto funky old trees, so we have new yummy things growing on, like swamp crab apple and all these wild things. So I love, love, love that. And we have them producing now, so you can have an established tree that is growing yucky apples. You cut it off and you graft on a yummy apple, and you're getting apples off of it in 3 years.
That is
Probably
exciting.
Not 15 yet. Easy to grow.
Well, tomatoes.
Oh, well, yeah, tomatoes are fruits. Cucumbers are fruits. Peppers are fruits.
5 more.
Well, I can tell you some that are hard to grow and you shouldn't try. Oh, plums. Plums are easy.
Okay.
Mulberry. Mulberries, well, once you have a big one, oh my God, it's like the best thing you can possibly imagine. But the trees are not easy to establish. We have had so many mulberry trees die in Western Washington. They get wet feet and frozen tips, and not easy. Not that easy. Kiwi is not that easy.
We're having good luck with black currants. They've been growing great here for us.
Yum. Black currants are great, and if you get them well established, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And really high nutrient. Gooseberries can be easy to grow depending on where you grow, and they can be very productive, but sometimes there are some little caterpillars that get pretty excited about chewing all their leaves off.
We also have lychee berries.
You have some growing?
Yeah, we have some growing. We got them from this guy in Ashland. Does sort of exotic plants and heirlooms them. He grows them in Ashland and then he propagates them. We've been propagating them too. You know what's another really good one is quince. Does quince grow up there?
I can see the tree out the window right now. It's budding
So
up.
do you get fruit off of yours?
About every other year.
Yeah. Yeah, those are amazing fruits.
I love
Apparently,
quince.
They're one of the only sort of real fruits left. That's like an original fruit.
Yeah, old style.
Yeah, and they're so good. They're really, really high in nutrients. They're getting a lot of quinine. They're really good for cramps and to stop bleeding and stuff. They're astringent. Yeah, they're a great thing to have. We've been propagating them and planting them, and we've got a lot growing around here that just came from our tree in different people's yards and stuff. Yeah.
How are you doing that?
We just let's see, when did we get them? I guess in the fall we pull some of the suckers out of the ground and try to get a little bit of the root on it. And we put it in a bucket of water. I think in February we pull them out, January or February. And then put it in a bucket of water, like just in the garage, and put roottone in there or get some willow branches and chop and put those into the water, because that actually roottone that you use
comes from willow.
Yeah, it comes from willow. So, and that helps their roots start. And then we just put them in pots in the spring, and then usually in the fall. Sometimes I sell them if we're having a sale or something. A plant. Sometimes we sell them, or I give them away for gifts and stuff.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, so you're supposed to leave them in the water for about 2 to 3 months, and just kind of check on them and stuff. But yeah, works really good.
Well, I haven't tried that with our quince, but it does look very nice, and I love it.
I do have a question. Galilee, do you differentiate fertilizing for fruits or vegetables or other crops, or do you is it just compost, or is there a way you look at a different plant requiring a different mineral or need?
Yes, I don't do the same for everything. I tend to do compost for things that grow longer, like garlic and raspberries and fruit trees. And I tend to do manure for things that grow fast and don't require aren't very mineral rich, like corn, for example. Corn grows fast and isn't really a mineral crop. Same for melons. They grow fast. They're not a mineral crop. And then stuff that grows fast but is more about nutrient, like greens and beets and carrots, cabbages. I use manure and a mixture of micronutrients. I like kelp and azomite. Azomite is great, and green sand, and just a mixture of nice, like, kind of treats, soil treats that I sprinkle in before I plant.
Great. Yeah. And that would be like a one-time deal for,
Yeah.
okay.
Well,
Yeah.
once a year. I mean, once a year.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Can we talk about some easier medicinals that you grow and use?
Garlic.
Yes.
Garlic is really, really great medicinal. And yeah, I used to grow a lot more medicinals than I do now. Peppermint, chamomile, lavender. A lot of the weeds around here are medicinal. So there's yarrow and self-heal, chickweed, dock. But I don't grow those. They're just wild.
They're there. Yeah, you collect them and use them as teas.
Yeah, or eat them, salad wise,
Yeah.
whatever. Yeah.
Free.
Well, echinacea, the
Yeah.
root, and actually, I use the whole plant of the echinacea. If any of your listeners make tincture or use tincture, often you'll see echinacea root tincture, because that's like the part of the plant that can easily be dried and shipped around. But in the spring, when the leaves look the most vibrant, you can make a leaf tincture. Use less alcohol for that. And then in the summer, when the flowers look really just super happy, you can make a flower tincture. And then in the fall, when the seeds are just forming and still juicy, but completely formed but not dry, I guess I should say, then you can make a seed head tincture. And then in the fall, when the plant has died back, you can make a root tincture. And then in the New Year's, then you mix all those tinctures back together, and then you have a whole plant tincture. And it's just such a different feeling to have that whole plant tincture, but each thing taken in its most vibrant point of life.
Wow, that sounds great.
It's yummy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that
And
with garlic. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what you need.
I mean, not mix it to garlic, but if you're feeling like you might be getting sick or something like that, it's great.
Sure.
Compliment.
Yeah. Right. Okay. Brian wrote down black locust flowers. Is that a question?
Yeah, they're not medicinal, but they sure make you happy. I mean, I guess that's medicinal. You can black locust flowers, pick a big handful of them, or big, they come in like a string. They grow in a string, and grab a whole string of them and shake the bugs off and put them in a big glass jar, fill with nice clean water, and put it in the sun and make for a couple hours and make a sun tea, and then strain that out. Is so delightful. I don't know if it has any medicinal properties except for joy, which is, well, what can you beat that?
Right. We can all use that. I remember we worked on a lasagna compost pile, and you said you can't leave out the flowers.
Yeah.
You layered in flowers. Do you do that regularly?
Yeah, I always try and put some flowers in one layer at least. A layer a little bit closer to the top, but not the top layer. And I love to layer some flowers in. I'm glad you remember that. I don't remember talking about that, but I believe it.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
And the self-heal flowers, I've been collecting those now. I've finally started recognizing they're everywhere. And you just, when they're full bloom, the little flowers, you just collect them, dry them, and use them in tea.
The only ways that I've used it is to eat it when it's fresh, and then to make a flower essence, which is a whole nother thing. It's not a tincture. It's, I don't know how to explain it. It's more like capturing the energy of the flower and transferring it to water. It requires some prayer and intentionality around that process. There's no alcohol involved in that, but I haven't dried self-heal. I've only made flower remedies and then just eat it fresh, use it fresh, or make macerate it and put it in a poultice or when it's fresh. But I'm sure you probably could. I just haven't done that.
Mitzie did in one of her shows, she gave us a recipe for a meadow flower salve in tallow. So that was really nice. Yeah. Okay. Did I cover all of my questions? Oh, yeah.
There are some questions that you had sent to me that we haven't talked about if you want me to still talk about them.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Let me look those up. I did want to ask you your opinion on the no-till. Like how, like that whole perspective of disturbing all the microbes and the networks that are happening under the soil,
Yeah.
What's your opinion of that?
I have seen some people who have amazing gardens that they have cultivated carefully over years and use only forking, and the soil is amazing and productive. I totally have seen it. I haven't achieved that myself, partially because I'm growing stuff for sale. So I'm growing more than I need. So I have, a bigger field. It's a very, very, very small farm, but still it's a bigger field than I could fork myself. And so I haven't done the no-till. I haven't cultivated that no-till style, but I know that it can be done on a small scale and be quite stunning.
Well, a lot of people do no-till without the forking.
Yeah.
You don't have to fork.
The issue with like all the rain that we get here, there's a tendency for compaction. And Brian has set aside all of these tire irons, 4-way tire irons. He's like, we can build a broad fork out of these because it's tempered steel. And one day we will get around with it, because like right now, I know even though I mulch my garlic, that clay is really compacted. And I would love to just like loosen it up a little.
Yeah. It's tricky around here, but I do know some people who've done it. Mostly they have a slope to help. One of the problems that comes with no-till is you get a potential for a lot more predators, especially of the sluggy and shrewy type of predators, because there's so much habitat for them to be in next to all your plants. So if you're trying to seed something like lettuce right next to a mulchy area, there's just so much habitat for slugs to be in. They can just come on out and munch your babies.
Yeah, I think a lot of people plant inside and then transplant outside.
Yeah.
Do you do that, or do you mostly direct sow?
Both. I mean, it depends on the crop. Like I don't direct seed lettuce. I start lettuce in and transplant it out. But even then, it's tempting for little sluggy creatures if you have that problem. And but beets and carrots, of course, I direct seed, and beans I direct seed, and melons I transplant, tomatoes and peppers I transplant.
But squashes, winter squashes, do you direct seed your winter squashes?
No, I transplant those as well. I seed them in the greenhouse. I seed them in the greenhouse in little pots, and then I transplant them. But I do direct seed zucchini.
Yeah, I direct seed all of my the squashes, because they just seem like they're so easy to get. They're really fragile. you know.
Yes, they don't like transplanting. It's true.
Yeah,
So you got to be real careful and don't let them get too big in the greenhouse.
yeah.
It's just that we have cold, wet soils in June often, and so a
Um,
lot of times those seeds will rot. So depending on your climate,
mm,
where melons are grown commercially, they certainly don't transplant them like I do. But I couldn't get it. There would be no way to germinate melon seed here because they need 80 degrees soil temperature. So
okay. Uh-huh.
yeah, so I have to do that in the greenhouse and then move them out.
Mm.
Yeah.
Oh, Brian had just wrote a note that since both Mitzi and I were looking into electroculture and the benefits of copper and copper tools, Brian had an idea of putting copper pipe on the broad fork tongs
Oh,
for that. Yeah, and I
yeah.
thought that that'll be really neat.
That's
And then
interesting. Yeah.
oh, and then he also wrote some issue, like we have some issues with voles here and them tunneling. And
Yeah.
just yesterday we were getting propane and there was a farmer getting propane too. And he's like, have you ever seen the Roto Raider? And we're like, no, what's that? And it's like some gun that you shoot into the hole of the vole and it fills it with propane and there's some sort of igniting switch and it just blows up the whole tunnel. You can
Whoa.
see the whole ground lifting. I
With
don't know if we're gonna
propane?
try
Wow.
with yeah, with
Yeah.
propane.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a whole but he said that he grew up farming in this area and that's what how they dealt with all of the vole tunneling.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, and moles. Yeah.
Yeah. Moles I trap. Sorry. Moles I trap with scissor traps. That works pretty good. Voles, I just kind of deal with them and hope that the dog gets a bunch of them, and that works pretty good. Um, Raccoons, dogs are super helpful to get them in a tree and then shoot them out of the tree. Raccoons are probably have been our worst problem when we don't have a dog during the year. There have been some years where we didn't have a dog, and raccoons have been probably caused the most trouble of any. And pocket gophers, when we didn't have a dog, too. That's the worst. Um, Mice, I use regular traps for mice. There's mouse traps for mice, and that works pretty good. Deer and elk, we have a pretty substantial fence, and it's a lot of work to build it, but that's what we do for deer and elk.
It's like 9
Yeah.
feet.
No, it's 7.
Okay.
But the top part is just visual. It's strings. You have seen it. The first 4.5 feet are a field fence, and then the second 3.5 or the second 3 feet the remaining 3 feet is an array of not an array, lines of baling twine and one row of barbed wire. So it's mostly a visual barrier on the above, and we have had pretty good luck there. There's like one deer that knows how to get in, but other than that, we do have a lot of deer and elk around here, so I'm considering it working.
And beaver?
Yeah, beaver. Get a dog.
Okay.
Well, and wire your trees. We've wired a lot of our trees after we had beaver trouble. Yep.
Yeah.
But that was when we didn't have a dog, too, so.
Okay, I'm going back to the list of questions and I just remembered to ask, do you supplement feed from alternative sources like go to restaurants or farmers markets, college campuses, or any other option for supplemental feed?
For animals?
Yeah.
Are you talking about feeding animals? We don't now. Oh, well, actually, no, there is a bakery, not a bakery, like a bread store in town that sells, when they have bread that's pull date bread, they make trash cans full of it, and you can get on the list to be the person to come get a trash can of it for like for $5 or something. And so we do use that a little bit, but I don't know that it's nutritious. It's more like treats. But no, we don't. But I know a lot of people who do that. You know, they get stuff from breweries, especially, and big restaurants. But we don't. And some grocery stores even will save stuff for you. I have been on that list before. When you live in a more urban area, we live rurally, so that's not that applicable for us.
Sure, sure. But keeping that in mind, it's good for other people to have those the scope of possibilities.
Yeah. When you do have that kind of situation, you need to make sure that your storage system is not encouraging rats, because that is the last thing you want to have on your small farm is rats. And sometimes storing of extra food like that can be a rat encouragement.
Right.
So be careful.
Right.
Use it up. Use it up.
Right.
Yeah.
Wood stoves in greenhouses was like something that Brian had wanted to bring up into the conversation for like a competitive fruit market, to have things ripen before other people are.
There was an amazing fellow down near us who did that, but he has passed on, and the land he was doing it on wasn't his, so everything had to be taken down. But it was amazing. We called that place the Fruit Zoo. He had apricots and peaches and cherries growing and fruiting in this succession, and all kinds of berries and grapes like you wouldn't believe. And it was quite an amazing operation he had, but that all got dismantled, and he passed away. And I guess he was quirky enough that nobody could work with him and learn all of his crazy tricks. So that was one of those sad things of like, no, I don't think there's anybody who's doing what he did, because nobody learned from him. And he was a massive experimenter. He had these furnaces he was feeding hog fuel into. I mean, that's what they call the stuff they get off of in the sawmill, all the little extra little bits. He was feeding it into these big furnaces, and there was piped and duct into the greenhouses, and he was selling to co-ops and stuff like that. But he's gone. Rest in peace, Tom Woods.
I'm glad you saw that.
Yeah,
And
amazing.
yeah, definitely worth mentioning.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Somebody should do it again.
Yeah.
And teach them. Yeah.
So how much of your produce, you say that about 3/4 of what you grow is for sale, and then you grow pretty much everything you need on a half acre, and how much of that are you preserving? Like the excess you'll be preserving, canning, drying, putting up?
Well, and we also eat out of the garden year round because of the climate we live in. Like we cover stuff and store stuff. Like carrots and beets are in the ground. Well, we just finished the last of last year's carrots and beets, but some stuff like that, greens, leeks, is outside all year round. But yeah, we preserve a lot. But don't get me wrong, we still shop at the store too a lot. Like we don't have any dairy, so we buy all of our dairy. We have hardly any nuts. We have some hazelnuts and some walnuts, but we buy nuts in addition. We don't grow chocolate or coffee or tea. So I mean, we don't grow avocados. We don't grow. I mean, we buy a lot of stuff too. So, and we buy some meat. We buy some meat from neighbors. So we don't grow all of our own food.
Well, sure.
Yeah.
But like I just sent some seeds to my mom, and I'm like, that head of lettuce is going to be the best one you've ever had, because she never really got into growing. She, just some flowers here and there. And just anything, even a potted herb, it's the best thing to add to your meal. Everything that I can, just bring into my kitchen is just extra, that much more special.
Yeah. I mean, even though I said that we do shop, we wouldn't have to. Like we could survive, but that's because we've got a lot of systems in place and know how to store stuff, and have been doing this for a long time. So, yeah.
And I guess my last question is, what are your compost techniques? What do you do for your compost building? Do you do that?
I don't do it quite as vigorously as I used to. I used to be much more, I don't know, more excited about it maybe. But the thing that matters the most with compost is make sure you don't put anything with weed seeds in it, because most people can't get compost in a home scale. You're not going to get your compost system hot enough for long enough to kill weed seeds, and the last thing you want to be doing is making, if you're trying to make compost to put on other things. If you're just trying to make compost to have a place to put all of your things that you weed out of your garden or whatever, then it doesn't really matter. But if you're trying to make compost that you're going to use elsewhere in your garden, try not to put any weed seeds in it. So that's important. And make sure that you layer things that you have a nice mixture of green and brown, I like to call it. So brown can be dried leaves or straw, or manure can be the brown, and then the green is more like grass and fresh weeds and fresh things. Make sure that you're layering them, and don't forget the flowers. And don't overwater your compost because you need it to breathe. And turn it at least twice during the warm season, and you don't have to turn it during the wet season. And if you can cover it against rain, that's nice because then you won't leach out your minerals. But if you just, again, if you're just needing a place to store your stuff, make sure you're not encouraging rats. And there's so many composting books out there. That's another one that in those piles of books that I've been talking about at the used bookstore or the library book sale, you're going to find composting books. So there's lots of ways to do it.
Sure. And now Brian wants to hear about your biochar experiment.
Well, I haven't made any biochar, but you guys have given me some, and I've used it. Mostly, I've used it on perennial type stuff. So rather than in the vegetable garden. So I've used it on some raspberries. I've used it on some strawberries. I have put it under some trees that I planted. And I can't say that I'm noticing a huge difference in my observation, but it feels nice to put it on.
Yeah.
And I'm not real savvy. The people that talked about buying biochar are Brian and Jenna, and not me, because I'm not too savvy about it. But it seems like a good idea.
The theory in it is what we're going on, and just because we have so much biomass to deal with here, and layering it, and it does make a very visual, stunning contrast when we're layering it into the compost. The green against the black, and the theory is breaking down, it's getting sucked up into the biochar, and that part of it is very fun.
No, I think it's a good layer to add into the compost, for sure. And I think that I think it's worth. If you do use biochar, try and observe and take notes and see if you're noticing a difference. Like with anything in the farming, really try and be a good witness and observer, and take notes.
Right, and it needs to get charged. It needs to absorb something if you're going to use it, so that whatever you're wanting to add, that will theoretically hold in there for thousands of years, you're going to inoculate into that charcoal and then put it into the garden. So it could be inoculated.
You told me had to stir it with the first cutting of grass.
Yeah.
So that's what I did, and then I have a nice big barrel of that where it kind of digested the grass in a way. It looks pretty interesting. So I've been taking samples of that, and
Great.
Yeah.
Well, I think we got through our all of the questions that I had in mind. Galilee, is there any final thoughts that you'd like to speak to on?
Maybe, make sure you grow, don't just grow one kind of something, just make sure you grow variety. And I don't know, since I don't really know who our listeners are, but be a good witness and be willing to take the time to pay attention and talk to neighbors and people like that thing about Jerry said. I mean, I've been growing quince trees for a long time, but I never thought about propagating them. So just like hearing that, it's like, oh, you know, talk to
Yeah,
people
because
who are
there's
doing
such
stuff.
quince are such a hardy. They're actually a bush, but people train them into a tree. They're so hardy, and if left by themselves, they will produce so much. And by having those around in your community, neighborhoods and stuff. Yeah, exactly what you were saying at the beginning, telling your neighbors don't come to my house. But if you can even do guerrilla gardening where you just plant it places. There was this one bush in Wairika in the town that I work in. And oh my God, it was so full of fruit every single year. And then somebody bought the building and they bulldozed it down and put a parking lot up over it. Oh. I know.
Well, hopefully somebody had taken a cutting of it at some point before that.
I know. I should have thought of that. Well, I kind of saw it. Well, I guess I saw it happening, but I didn't think of that. But yeah. It's because it propagates so easily, and if you get it around, then a lot of people are going to be able to utilize it in the future.
Yeah. Encouraging neighbors to grow something that you're not growing is a nice thing too, so that you can share with each other rather than everybody growing all the same things. And I have seen some neighborhoods, some small like urban neighborhoods do a pretty nice job of that, where like one person will focus on all the broccoli family, or one household will focus on the broccoli family, and one household it takes a lot of collaboration. But I have seen a couple really nice examples of it, and then they share with each other, so that way you don't have to, you can focus on one type of crop, because they do have certain needs, and it's a pretty nice thing that people do. Oh, to add to the fruit list, loganberries and marionberries. Yeah.
Yum.
Yum. Well, hopefully
now Brian said how
you had a question about organic certification is necessary. Absolutely not. I have never had, when people ask me, is your food organic, and I describe what that means and what we do is way beyond organic, nobody has ever said, well, then I'm not going to buy from you. People have said, well, then I really want to buy from you. So definitely it's not necessary, and CSA is not certified. CSA is just a term that is used loosely for all kinds of different forms of selling food, so it's not a certified thing.
Do you ever use one of those refractometer, or what are they called, Jenna? Those things that you can measure the amount of vitamins or nutrients in your plants?
Oh, the brick. Yeah, the bricks can be measured with a refractometer.
Bricks only measures sugars.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes, we do have a refractometer, and we use it to test about the grapes, if they're as sweet as they're going to get, because sometimes it's hard to tell when you're eating a grape, because the skins are sour, and it's just fun to try all kinds of different. You can do different melons and stuff like that. We have one, but the grapes is the only place where we've used it very studiously.
Well,
you want to
Brian,
wait until your sugar content is highest on grapes for picking.
Right. Like Gary Klein had suggested that there are the sugar also includes many other things. It's not only just sugar. So, but it's not a definite measurement of what minerals there are in that. So
I don't know anything about that. That's interesting. No, I'm unaware of that.
Okay. Well, this is Earth Day weekend coming up, and Brian said in honor of Earth Day, he said he's telling me that I should read part of the communitarian trap page about food distribution.
Good idea.
Okay. Is this the one? The setup?
The communitarian setup?
Yep.
Is it down here?
I don't know.
Yeah, I couldn't find it in my feed. Or maybe you put it on email.
This
you
whole
could
thing?
do it after
the big setup. Okay, here it is. The big setup. GMOs and their corporate profits are being advanced at the safety and expense of mankind. But at the same time, the unaware should note how the solution to this food safety issue is being handled, since it's also attributing to the same hidden objectives of the GMO corporate executives and now 3D printed lab grown foods. Food justice activists view the solution to fighting against GMOs and their manufacturers by transitioning toward locally owned foods. The fact is often overlooked is that the United Nations also supports those efforts. So, as they promote GMOs as being the solution to world hunger, they also support the local small farm movement as the solution to climate change. Do you see the inconsistencies? They are doing this because they are all one in the same. Based on UN documents, their sustainable food system will resemble a neo-feudal food plan. Neo-feudalism, the phenomenon of corporations taking control of cultures and individuals through money, policies, practices, and gatekeeping in general, to the point that they control many aspects of everyday private life. When the Agenda 21 and GMO plans are fully in place, the rural areas in America will serve the cities with food. Corporate, government, communitarian laws are being put in place to control every aspect of local, regional, national, and international rules and the regulation for food production and sale, including food quality, safety, and industry. They don't have our interest at heart, and there is nothing free about the new food system. The part the communitarian totalitarians don't tell their followers is that by the year 2020, this was written in 2013, 20% of our food will be grown locally, and then 50% by the year 2050. Rural areas are designed to be converted into farmlands to serve the cities. There is a reason our country went to large-scale farming. This sounds like a plan for starvation. A global crisis is being precipitated by selected, non-elected world leaders. Out of this crisis will come the opportunity for a new age, Aquarian kingdom to be realized. Our future global food system is only part of that control grid, since he that controls the food controls the world.
So you can attribute that to the communitarian trap, all one word, .blogspot.com. In that article, there is a link to Alex Jones, and he points out that neo-feudalism is the story of we would put ourselves in a castle, a enclosure, and our enemies would simply surround us and starve us out, or we would no longer have water. This is what Alex is pointing out. They're going to do it to us in the same fashion. So Galilee, if you wanted to, any comments on that little spiel?
Well, we are starting to see some signs in our valley, which is a rural agricultural valley. I am seeing some indication that government entities are trying to put themselves in positions, very Earth Day-ish fashion, like habitat restoration and things like that, where government organizations are positioning themselves around our valley, not literally, but sort of literally, through projects that I could potentially see being a control mechanism, and there are outside interests buying up farmland here in the valley. So I am wary and alert to such things. Meanwhile, I'm eating some of last year's cauliflower out of the freezer and feeling quite confident that we will be okay.
Yes, you will. Thank you so much for helping.
Try to keep it in perspective. It could be really bad, but it could also be really good, like this cauliflower. You should really try it. Frozen cauliflower is so good.
Nice. Do you freeze it in water or just like that?
Blanch it. So cut it into florets, blanch it in boiling water for 2 minutes, then put it in cold water for 2 minutes, shake and drain it out, and then put it in bags and freeze it in bags, and I eat it thawed right out of the freezer, just thawed out like that. It's delicious.
Nice.
Or, I mean, you can fry it up too, but it's so good.
Throw it in soups and stuff. Yeah.
Well, I just like it fresh right out of the bag, like a snack. Or fried in butter, which you should have a bunch of in your freezer, by the way.
I'm growing a lot of cauliflower this year. I started a whole bunch of starts.
Yeah, cauliflower freezes great.
Oh, good. Okay.
And like one head of it, I mean, if you have a nice big head, I mean, you can freeze enough for like 3-quart bags from one of those big heads of cauliflower. Yeah.
Are they heavy feeders?
Yes, Brian, I do see some danger on the horizon, but not going to let it stop me.
Yeah, the Agenda 21 that we didn't know what it was until
we got kicked off the farm. Yep.
And the lower field gets bought up, and
by DNR.
Yeah, and the day you had
these entities.
Yeah, and the day you had to announce that a bear had jumped over your 4-foot fence and was after your gooseberries, and the head honcho from Duke University had a big grin on her face. Oh boy, we're rewilding.
Yep. They were trying to get agriculture to be a thing of the past. I don't know what she plans on eating for dinner.
Well, it's Doug Furs on 10-foot centers.
Yeah.
Because we're killing the salmon.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, we process our sewage at the saltwater, and on any big rain event, they just open the spigot. So that's killing salmon, I believe.
Yep.
There's big problems afoot, and their solution is to put us in smart cities where they will control what we do, eat, and anything they say goes.
Feel. Yep. Yeah, I wonder really what the urbanization, I mean, urban life is changing so much about the way people even are, even think, and what they even think is possible. And I really do think that there's actually, honestly, I think there's a divergence of the species going on, where there's like urban species and rural species becoming so different.
Yeah.
And rural way of life is being pushed out because the urban mindset controls a lot of how things, a lot of what happens, and a lot of the media and everything is orchestrated by urban mindset. And if urban mindset is changing so much that it's actually a different creature, I'm worried, honestly, about what that's going to look like. And I already see evidence of it already, and I'm going to be alive another 30 years or something. So
I'm seeing the importance of talking to those neighbors that kind of turn up their nose at you because they have a new job sitting at a keyboard that they can stay in their underwear all day at home. They want to go for a little walk in the middle of the afternoon.
Right.
And boy, if those climate killers aren't running tractors and chainsaws, and they might even need to get rid of some waste wood to cut down on the fire hazard, we are now the problem in these people's eyes.
It is interesting with the urban people moving into the rural. Yeah.
That's why it's important to talk to these people at the mailbox. Don't participate in the Hegelian dialectic divide of us and them, because they want to go there.
Right. Right. I like to say farmers have been working from home since before it was a thing.
Galilee, I was wondering if you had heard of this thing going on now where there's this labeling that's going on to organic foods in the stores called Appeal. It's an Appeal sticker, capital APEEL. And you haven't heard about it? So
No,
basically, it's a way for those, climate, whatever people to cut down on plastic waste. Of course, I try to buy vegetables that aren't in plastic. In fact, I always do. I don't buy stuff in plastic. But anyway, for stores to be able to offer food without plastic around it, they're putting this like a coating on stuff, and it's not really clear what's in the coating, but apparently it's really dangerous, and it's allowed to be on organic food. So anything that needs to be peeled, basically you can't get rid of it, and it's on organic foods, and it's causing like eye issues and all kinds of stuff. Really
I've never
bad.
heard of this.
Yeah, I guess
Bill,
it's starting to come out.
Bill and Melinda are invested in the idea.
Yeah.
Oh, gross.
Yeah, so it's causing major eye damage for eyes, which I have seen a lot of people with eye problems lately in my practice. Everybody's complaining about that. But these are also
I have heard of a lot of eye problems lately too, actually.
Yeah.
I don't know anything about that. But
I'll send you this article.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's something you could look up on the internet since it's post-internet.
Right. Yeah.
All right. Well, have we reached our time?
I think we did. We covered it all. Thank you so much, Galilee.
You're welcome, and I hope you have a great rest of your week.
You
Thanks
too.
so much.
All right.
Have a good night. Take care.
Good night. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.